Ori, welcome aboard to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, what was it? A couple years ago, the life of everybody changed forever, and I think, and I'm talking about, ChatGPT making their huge announcement. But since then, I feel like life is changing on almost a weekly basis with every new release of, Claude Code, every new release of ChatGPT. Just this week, we heard that Cursor came out with their shitty beginning, I might say, of their multi-agent strategy. But the multi-agent strategy is going to just change things again. So let's take this from the top. And I want to talk, first of all, about how we used to work in the past, or many companies still today are working in this way with kind of the traditional flow from, executives and OKRs to product managers to engineering to support. What did life look like before? And then after that, we're going to talk about what life might look like in the future.
So I think it's a great question. And the first thing that we need to answer is when, and if you talk about, I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago, back then, we were very like software development and everyone's life were more sequential, meaning you did one thing and then you did the other. You first developed and then you test and then you rolled out and then you deployed. And then, we had the famous software as a service and cloud adoption and transformation and the great years of digital transformation and COVID. Everyone wanted to be digital, which is great. So software moved into a continuous manner. You do everything and you push and you get feedback and you iterate faster and faster and faster. And then all of a sudden, AI came to our lives, although the technology existed in some way, form, or shape since the 60s, if you really want, to give the history lesson. So I think this is kind of what we need to understand, that we are at real verge of disruption in every industry. And like, I can give an example. A couple of weeks ago, my CEO reached out to me and said, "Oh, I need you to do a meeting, this and that company. I need you to run like an analysis." Now, in the past, what I would do is, I would carve out a couple of hours, even days, looked into the documentation, review sites, look at Reddit and some others. What I did this time was quite amazing. I opened my GPT account that I have as part of the company, gave it some prompt, directed it into the right resources, and a couple of minutes later, I had everything that I had, just as one very practical example. So I think this is like how I would answer your question. And also, I think that the one currency that keeps improving with technology is speed. We're just doing everything significantly faster, which is both scary and exciting if you think of it.
So I think it's a really beautiful point that you're making, that we have been innovating the software process over the last 20 years, until ChatGPT. But something fundamentally changed when ChatGPT could code. And, I don't want to, understate here. We have Claude, we have other options. I'm just using them as the name. So it seems like we had a structure where we had front-end developers, back-end developers, we have some full-stack developers, we have the UI, you have the UX, we have product people. That structure, by and by, has been the same for the last 20 years. I'm starting to ask myself, I myself am a, CTO slash product manager. I'm starting to ask myself, the structure of the future, is it going to be the same? Because I'm seeing product managers who have architectural knowledge just do all the work by themselves, working with, 6, 7 agents at the same time, Claude open, and they're making progress, which is X than what you would do in the previous paradigm. So what is the hiring? What is the team structures of the future look like? And I'm not sure we really have an answer to that yet. What's our best guess?
I think we don't have the answer yet. First, because the technology is still shaping. And, you can also say, like, we like to say that, or with vibe coding platforms and, from base 44 to Lovable to all the rest, just as, example of great tools, software is now at the hands of the masses, meaning software creation can become or can reach the mass very easily. Now, what does it mean? It means that, again, going back to speed, we can innovate faster. Okay. But like every other, it has a benefit and it has some risks, and we need to be aware of that. Now, to your question, I think that we still haven't figured it out. Meaning, if you take a look at the previous kind of transformation or the big major shift in technology, cloud, which is the last one that I think most of us in the industry right now went through, you had new capabilities that, the supporting function, let's call them PM designers, started to add, which was back then, data analysis and funnel analysis and all of that. So I think as AI becomes native in our way of thinking, right now it's not native. We need to change how we think. We need to adapt to it. We need to add, whether it's incremental, whether it's wrappers on top, or whether we adapt and change the processes that we currently have, but we're not yet AI native. We'll get there, okay? But these are the type of skills that will also be added along the way. However, also we can argue on the other side that do development teams need PMs anymore? Do they need designers? Because I've seen, posts on LinkedIn and other social networks that say that in one of the hackathon, they gave GPT, to do the discovery. They handed it over to Cursor. They've done the development. They've done some, fixing on top of the output. And, all of a sudden you have a development team that can discover, ideate, write the requirements. I mean, not even write, but get the requirements from GPT, hand it over. So I think this is really, really exciting. And I believe that 2026.
Let's stay on that for a moment. Here's my prediction. The developers are going to argue the PMs are not necessary. The PMs are going to argue the developers are not necessary. And my opinion, they're both right. They are both correct. So how can that
it's a great question. And I think that 2026 will be kind of the year that will realize the new reality. Let's call it like that. We're also talking about designers and marketing. Like I've seen great solutions that replace traditional marketing, which is like, amazing. So what does it mean that, like agent will talk to agent, like the PM agent will talk to the development agent that will talk to the deployment agent. Management will just get an email saying we did that. Probably not, right? We'll get there at some point. But I think for now, we still need humans in the loop, which is a term that we hear all like every day, but it's definitely getting there. So at some point, I think we will still need the human anchor, but maybe not. So
I think we agree that long term, right? Long run, the humans are going to slowly disappear. There's going to be different ideas around what the future looks like, but we don't really know. But I think we do have very concrete ideas about what we're going to do tomorrow. So we can see product managers are changing their processes instead of just creating a long spec that people need to read, and honestly, nobody does. They're now creating full-fledged mock-ups in Lovable. And sure, engineering take that app in Lovable and they're like, okay, I get it. That acts as the spec. And then, as you described, engineers are creating their own specs and saying, well, does this make sense? Should we do this? So I think it's really empowering each of our functions to take their work to a whole new level. So if you were talking to anyone in the audience who their engineering team is still in that old paradigm, what's a baby step that you would recommend them to start from? Is it DevOps? Is it product? Is it engineers? What's that next level that they can reach, which is not utopia, but it's giving them tangible gains?
Yeah. So I think, and I had multiple discussions with that, with my team, with other people in the industry. AI, the main thing with AI is that it's actually kind of increases the number one problem in product management, which is what are the problems that worth solving. And now solving the majority of those problems just became a lot easier. So instead of, falling in love with AI, and we've all fallen in love with AI just due to the nature of it, and everyone's seen, the post that no more new developers or code is now being written by whatever percentage. But the point is we need to put additional emphasis on what problems are we trying to solve, and does it even make sense to solve it with AI? Okay. Now, the one thing to your question is, my recommendation would be think about your number one problem right now. And what's the biggest bottleneck in your entire process? Is it requirement gathering? Is it design? Is it technical design? Is it implementation? And look how you can accelerate, using AI or any of the existing tools. Now, on what you just mentioned on, moving from documentation to prototyping, I think this is the biggest change that is already happening. You said nobody likes to write documentation. 100% with you. I think that, a PRD is a document that development makes product right that nobody reads.
Yes.
These days are over because nobody needs to write documents anymore. And obviously, we are exaggerating, but let's be, futuristic for a second. I think this is already happening. That instead of having the product write a 12-page document that, maybe one um, engineer will write. To your point, they will experiment, that will generate their vibe coding. I'm already seeing great solutions that can take that, feed it into the existing design point, feed it into the existing code base, and then the development and the engineers will take that, fix it, make sure that it scales, security, performance, all of the non-functional you know requirements, and everybody will be more happier because product will be able to better explain what they want, development will get it, and we will most likely shorten the handover between the different functions.
One future that I think is possible today is a restructuring of the teams where you have a product UI UX team, and then you have a engineering team, which is just backend, right? So you're kind of taking away that role and responsibility of UI UX from the backend, from the engineering team. And then you basically see the product UI UX front end developers working together, creating the full HTML, everything, and it actually works. It's no longer a mock-up, and then the
Mhm.
backend team just like makes it work, right? Adds all the web services on the microservices and everything. So that's a very tangible step that I think companies can do today. And, there's nothing stopping them from doing it. You still have the humans, but the structure of the team, the way they work is fundamentally different. And you've moved from, 3, 4 teams. And every time you have more teams, there are kind of more communication between teams, to less teams, less communication, more efficient. So I think that's an amazing opportunity for a lot of companies out there. But you talked about risk. Let's deep dive into the risky part of this and the dangers of vibe coding, because a lot of the engineers are like, no, vibe coding is evil. But my personal opinion is, if you like it or not, it's going to become a thing ultimately. But we need to
Mhm.
mitigate the risks. So let's talk about a few of them, starting with security. Vibe coding is creating security risk inside of the code, inside of the DevOps deployments, across the board. First of all, let's understand what these problems are, and then let's talk about how we can potentially solve them with today's tools.
So, to me, vibe coding is the evolution of low code, no code platforms. And those existed for many, many years, from Salesforce to ServiceNow, business apps, customer facing apps, have existed. It's the same problem, only on steroids. What it means is the term citizen developer means that, engineers or non-professional developers are able to, create apps and push them to production, which means that, again, the good side, anyone can innovate. If you have an idea for an app, if it helps you solve a business problem internally, externally, anyone can expand it and write it and push it to production. So that's one thing which is great. But on the other side, it also, it's the perfect example of, with great power come great responsibility.
Yes.
And security is not something that most people think about. Okay. And it's something that, as the industry, and, coming from check marks, as a security vendor, security professional, talking to many CISOs, many security people over the years, it's something that starts with education, like understanding the risk of, you now even have a travel app that you just push, and I don't know, now your entire organization can open travel on their own. I'm making this stuff up, but you get the point, right? So first of all, is it has to start with education, just
Right.
like, a couple of years ago, and it still happens to this day, like everyone on the consumer side was launching campaigns against phishing, right? Because, if a phishing attack happens on a user, on a, let's call it a regular person that is not part of the enterprise, it possesses a risk to the company itself.
Weakest
So
chain.
same should happen here, right? Now, the risks here are very similar to everything that we've always done in software. Is, first of all, like, what's the impact that is going to happen? If you have I don't know, a read-only application, then the worst case that happen is that, the information will get leaked. However, what happens if it gets stolen, if it has the wrong permissions, so it might be able to access the backend. You just mentioned the backend engineers, so it will be able to access the backend systems. And then if you have like, I'm sure that the audience heard the term prompt injection. In the early, web application, it was about SQL injection,
Yeah.
and now it's prompt injection. So it's just the evolution. So just like on the tech side, on the creation side, on the defender side, the attackers are also evolving together with the technology. So we need to make sure that the right knowledge is there. And the big difference compared to everything else that we've done in the past is the pace and the scale, because vibe coding allows everyone, literally everyone in the organization, to write applications, whether it's, vibe coding, cursor, full vibe, like, all of that. It doesn't really matter. A colleague of mine likes to say that the future programming language is English. And
Yes.
how do you,
100%.
yeah, like how do you even, secure English? Think about that for a second. So definitely exciting times, but I think it has to start with education.
No, I love that point because if you don't understand your risk, if you don't understand what can go wrong, you don't even understand how to defend. For a funny point, I think every single vibe coder at some stage is going to understand the word sandbox, that they probably never came across it before. It wasn't a thing that, people in the street understood. But sandboxing is going to have to be a thing, right? Can your application access the internet? Yes or no? Can it extract information? What information is extracting? The stuff that, email security professionals have been talking about, like what data is being leaked? What is the types of data? Like this is suddenly going to have to become, to a certain degree, common knowledge because everybody's going to be thinking about it. Now, there's going to be two types of developers, I will argue. There's going to be the everybody developer, and it's, the marketing person, and they're probably not going to be building SaaS applications from scratch, but they will be building their own tools. And even these own tools, if you're using the leads and the customers of the company, that needs a level of security. And, tenfold, if you're building a SaaS application at scale, obviously you need security. What can we do practically today? I saw that Lovable has a small button to check the security of your code, but I wouldn't put any confidence in that. But there's a lot of platforms that can do code sec, for example. So scan your code. You get a whole bunch of security violations. Why not just take those violations back to the agent and be like, hey, can you fix these? And then do the code sec scan again and see, well, is this still an issue? So it seems like there's an opportunity to create feedback loops and to at least do something with these security violations that we have today.
I fully agree, and I will address that. But before addressing your question, one thing that, unlike previous technologies that we have, and it's still the majority of them, okay, like, we like to think that everyone is AI native. We are not there yet, but we're getting it faster than we believe. But the one thing that is different is the fact that agents and AI in general is learning all the time. So even if you give it a scope, the system itself can change its scope, which is really, really scary. Which is, I don't think we yet have a solution. I've seen a few early stage solutions that are going there, but this is really, this is the main difference, compared to a web application, that, you can enter username, password, you can download this, you can upload that. These are predefined actions that you knew how to assess the risk, put the right guardrails, and manage the risk. In security, like many other areas of our life, it's all about managing risk, and just like
Yeah.
insurance, there is no 100%. So
Ori,
that's
Ori
the
is
main.
going or he's going down on the deep edge now. I just want to kind of bring it back to the basic level. The reason why Ori is saying that it's better to have a smaller scope than a larger scope is because, natively we think, oh, the AI doesn't work. Let's give it more information. It turns out that's the wrong solution. It turns out that the smaller the scope of the agent and the more focused it is on one task, the better job it will do, the less chances for it to hallucinate. So that point that Ori made, very humbly, is actually the future of agentic program. It's the narrowing of the scopes. It's the guardrails of the agents. Incredibly, incredibly important points. I just wanted to say thank you there for a moment, and sorry for interrupting you. Keep going.
No, thanks for that. It's a good call out. So the one thing that I think we are about to witness is kind of a change of how we even test applications.
Yes.
And, coming from almost 7 years of application security and before that, many years in DevOps and functional testing and everything, we're going to do a lot of combination of different types of testing, specifically, and again, not to geek out on technology, but we are going to see kind of the evolution or revolution of dynamic testing, meaning to your point, there are solutions today that can test application like Lab application in real time. You can run that, like, you mentioned the button that Lovable has. It's a great starting point,
Yeah.
but it's not enough. And I think the opportunity is around to dynamically test, continuously dynamically testing your application. We're also going to see the fact that a few very known and traditional processes, activities in security is going away and is going to be replaced by agents. Pen testing is one great example that we see the majority of the analyst and the wide industry kind of pointing that out. So instead of having the human test it, whether it's weekly, monthly, doesn't really matter. You will have the agent continuously do that for you and also evolves over time. So I think this is kind of to your point,
Just
how
to expand on that point, the old paradigm of pen testing is once a year you do pen testing. It costs you $50,000, $100,000, or if you get somebody cheap, 25,000. Huge amount of money. Completely stupid because all you did is you tested a point in time. So, okay, so what that means is that the pen tester, probably one of the strategies they've used is they got the recent update that's come out of Microsoft or some other tool in your stack. They used more recently an LLM to reverse engineer that patch. You haven't patched it. Now they're penetrating your system using whatever patch you haven't patched. So is there value in that? My argument, no. But the paradigm that you're describing, this idea of continuous testing, whole different paradigm, incredibly valuable. In fact, even before we had these agents doing the work, I would argue against pen testing and against continuous white box audits once a month to make sure that you're not in risk in any way. But this is now the automation of that philosophy, which is incredibly, incredibly important. Are we seeing this? Is this close or is this still a little bit into the
Oh,
future?
it's already happening. Now, a few things to take into consideration. First of all, testing will stay with us. I don't know, for the near future, mostly because of compliance reasons. The fact that you have pen testing, to your point, doesn't mean that you're really protected. Or again, there is never 100%. You can never be sure. Now, so while the compliance will still gather, and if your organization is waiting for the regulation or compliance, you're already late. Why? Because attackers will always use the weakest link in the chain, which is always humans. Now,
Yeah.
what we are seeing is that instead of having the traditional attacks that are being covered by, the pen testing of, to your point, of a snapshot in time of your application, attackers are already using your supply chain. And again, look at some of the recent attacks
So
that
so hold on.
happened.
For those of us who are not security experts, what does that mean? What's a supply chain attack? What does that even mean?
Great question. Think of it as you have a bakery, okay? The bakery, in a very simplified way, produces bread, right? The bread is the application. This is kind of the analogy I want to give. However, along that way, you have the supplier that brings you the flour, you have your water, you have your oven, and you have your front of the shop, and so on and so on. Now, think of that, of the supply chain attack is by you eating the bread and getting a tummy ache. As simple as that. Now, it can happen because, you got, God forbid, poisoned flour, right? If you would only test, how the bread looks at the end and the shape and the weight and everything is perfect, right? Because you're not looking inside. So to your question, this is what the supply chain attacks look like. It attacks the process and the components that you have as part of your software development. And this is now becoming more of a risk compared to everything else that you have. And this is where attackers are right
Yeah.
now exploiting the weakest link, which is the supply chain of your software.
So to get practical, right, you're writing your code, but your code is using hundreds, if not thousands of modules, which you're doing an npm install, you're getting them off somewhere. If you don't have the latest version, maybe there's a security patch that they haven't patched, but maybe the latest one also has an issue because it's been attacked and changed. And in fact, we saw a supply chain attack not so long ago, which took down a whole bunch of computers all over the world. So this is a very real risk.
It's not real. It's not the only, but it's the major risk that you should care about. Okay. And it will only continue to grow with AI, because right now with AI, and again, the pace of adoption is off the charts. We've never seen something like that, right? GPT got to 100 million users in 2 and something months, right? Never seen like
Crazy.
something like that. And we are just getting started. So we are at the point that we don't know what we don't know, and hackers don't care. They will exploit that. And think about like, what's the goal of an attacker is to get something that you care about, so they can get the money so you can get it back, or they can take the data that is sensitive, confidential, and use it against you. This is what they want. So who said they have to do it on top of a run and live, a running and up and running like application? Who said that? If they can get into your developer, or now citizen developer, the vibe coding developers, they will do that, and they will do that much easier because of the education point that we mentioned before. I mean, we like the hackers only care about your application once they are in production, once they're running. It's been not that case for many years now,
Yeah.
because if they can, if the application is the door, if they can get through the window, they will get from there. So this is kind of the
It's your data, it's your customers, it's the credit cards of your customers. It's the ability to send an email, authenticated email from your account so they can send real spam or SMSs or whatever. If I had to make one recommendation to my kids of, what you should go and study in university, I think security is probably going to be a good bet for a long time to come.
it ties to the point, is like, what would the future generation university look like? Because even before AI, when a computer science student started in year, in his freshman year, the majority of the technology that it would face in reality, in real world, in the industry, were not even existing. And only when he
Yeah,
will get there, he will learn the new type of technology. So this is, a bigger topic to handle. But yeah, I mean, exciting times.
it really is. So we'll finish with one final question. What is the one piece of advice that you would give the 18-year-old thinking about going to study? Should they even go to university now, or is that kind of stupid until universities figure out what to teach us? What should be the youngsters' strategy for their future at this moment?
So I'm still a believer in, traditional, not traditional, but in education, let's say it like that. I would say keep an eye for everything new that comes. Stay hungry, learn everything that comes. Like, the pace of change is something that we've never seen before. And don't be afraid to pivot. Pivot your career, pivot your life. Think about, I like to say to my PMs as I talk to them about their careers, like, without a goal, it's hard to score, right? So think about what do you want to achieve, build a plan to achieve it, but also don't be afraid to pivot. Like, if we were to have this discussion like 200 years ago, and you would ask, like, would you like to be, I don't know, a horse rider? Those don't exist anymore, right? The point I'm making is humans always evolve. And I think we're already in the beginning of the evolution, with self-driving cars, with self-writing code, everything that we just talked about, vibe coding. I think it's, about staying hungry and learning all the time, adapting to what's happening, because reality and technology is changing everything that we do. So it's just stay hungry and, don't be afraid to pivot.
I love it. Ori, thank you so much for joining the show today. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation. Thanks, everyone.